Hey guys, Tim here. I just wanted to let you guys know that because of the way we record the podcast, sometimes some weird audio issues crop up, and me and Levi don't live in the same area, so we record over the phone and we record each side of the conversation and I edit it together. My side of the conversation this week, I recorded this week, and for next week's episode, I accidentally recorded in mono. And my microphone doesn't like recording in mono, so occasionally a little tiny splices of sound drop out on my side. I think most of it is decipherable, and for the most part it's fine. It's a little echoey, but for the most part you can hear it. It's just a few instances throughout, so if it starts to get a little choppy for a second or two there, know that that's what's going on. I'm sorry about that, and for episode 10 coming up, it'll still be an issue next week, but for episode 10 coming up, I will try to figure out the issue. I think it's the mono thing. I'm not sure. Anyway, enjoy the episode. On the desert world of Jeddah, in the Holy City, friends Baze and Chirrut used to be guardians of the Whills, who looked after the Khyber Temple and the devoted pilgrims who worshipped there. Then the Empire came and took over the planet. The temple was destroyed, and the people scattered. Now, Baze and Chirrut do what they can to resist the Empire and protect the people of Jeddah, but it never seems to be enough. Then a man named Saw Gerrera arrives, with a militia of his own and grand plans to take down the Empire. It seems like the perfect way for Baze and Chirrut to make a real difference and help the people of Jeddah live better lives. But will it come at too great a cost?
Hello and welcome back to Padawan Library, the Star Wars junior novel podcast. You better bet if the book has more than 200 pages, they better be double-spaced or we're not reading it. I'm Levi Paratic, and with me as always is Tim May. Tim, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Levi?
I'm hanging in there.
All right, well, that's what this podcast is for. Escape from our everyday problems, our very ordinary everyday problems.
Yes, and I escape to Star Wars all the time. I don't know about you, but my Star Wars intake since this podcast has tripled.
It's definitely gone up just because the podcast, requires that it does. I will say, for the most part, I am not reading other Star Wars books, just because I like to read books in general. So,
yeah.
Part of the reason we chose young readers' novels is so that I could read books for the podcast, but then keep going and reading, other books, literature, if you will.
I made the mistake this week of the book on today's episode, Guardians of the Whills. I finished last week, and I've started another Star Wars book. I'm reading Leia by Claudia Gray, and that was probably a mistake because I've forgotten so much of this book.
See, that's the other problem. It's for the podcast. I just feel like I would just consuming too much extra Star Wars content would be just a lot. So, let's see. But as far as you mentioned Leia, Princess of Alderaan by Claudia Gray, that is, and you mentioned also the book we're reading this week, Guardians of the Whills. These are both canon novels, new canon novels. Yes. And this is an interesting subject. We touched on it a little bit here or there, but obviously when Disney bought Lucasfilm, a couple years later in 2014, they had a hard reset on all the expanded universe, Because if there's going to be new movies, then this stuff needs to help promote those movies, and you don't want all this stuff that contradicts those movies directly in the way. A lot of people were very mad about this, of course, which isn't, surprising. The expanded universe, which is what we've covered so far on this podcast, meant a lot to a lot of people, and it was important for Star Wars fans. But, I understood the decision at the time. It didn't mean I was, jumping for joy that, other stuff I liked.
It made sense.
It makes sense, though. And I've read a lot of the new canon material, and a lot of it is very good. We talked about Lost Stars a couple of weeks ago.
Also by Claudia Gray.
Who has already established herself as one of the best Star Wars writers, period, I think. How are you liking Princess of Alderaan?
I like it a lot so far. I'm only halfway through it. But the Panaka scene, the fact that she brought this episode 1 character back and had this one moment with Leia, and it was incredible. Just though I guess I won't try to spoil anything, but it's he notices something familiar in her look, if that gives you any clues.
That scene's amazing, and there's a lot of just great character stuff in that book. We won't be covering that book because that is a young adult book.
Yes.
So we won't be doing it. Although Claudia Gray, she does have, once again, she has the Master and Apprentice book coming out, and I think it would be a fun idea to do as maybe a bonus episode or something.
Just because it's the first thing to contradict Jedi Apprentice. Yeah. So, I will say one thing about Claudia Gray. Both Lost Stars and Leia have Mon Mothma cameos in it, and I think she should write a Mon Mothma book.
It could happen,
a solely dedicated book, because she writes that character so well, and every time she showed up in each of those books, the scene's incredible, and she to have such a voice for such a small character that's in the movies, and to have it be so fleshed out in these books is something that goes to show how good she is at writing Star Wars.
Yeah, and she, you haven't read Bloodline, right?
No, I haven't.
That's her other book. That one's really good, and I think it does something that maybe a book we're talking about later does, which it enhances one of the movies substantially. So that's the other thing. The interesting thing is, because these books are constantly in position to help promote new movies, which was not the case with the expanded universe most of the time. They often have somewhat narrow focuses, so I think there has been... Some of them have been great. I think the Claudia Gray books have been great. There's another book that we'll talk about a little bit more in relation to the main topic, which is Catalyst by James Luceno, who is an EU veteran from way back, but... that's a prelude to Rogue One, which also the book we're discussing today is. But I think there hasn't been, not hasn't been, but there have been fewer just standalone novels that really are doing a lot. So, but what's interesting is we have right now we're in the middle of kind of a 20th anniversary of Phantom Menace celebration. So they've put out a couple books related to that. There's Queen's Shadow? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Which my brother, former guest Stan May, he got that for his birthday. So I will be reading that at some point, and I'll talk about it on the podcast. Also a young adult novel, so we'll just talk about it in an intro or something. But
you know what? I've heard something about that book.
Oh, okay.
You've probably heard this too. That Padme goes to Batuu of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, and she orders a drink at the cantina, a drink that you yourself can go to Batuu when it opens and order yourself.
This is the best. This is the promise of the new canon, by the way, is that everything has equal weight, supposedly. All the comics, all the novels, any video game content they might ever produce, the movies, theme parks, all of it apparently has equal weight. I don't buy that for a second.
No.
But because I mean they haven't done enough that there's been able to be any big contradictions, but there will be. They're going to have to handle it. They did it in the EU too. The EU is one of the most well managed, licensed, expanded universes that's ever been. It's the most well managed that's ever been attempted, and there's still plenty of contradictions all over the place. It'll happen with the new canon too. And honestly, if it doesn't, that means that they're just not doing enough interesting stuff. If that makes sense. I don't know. I think there's been a lot of good books, though. I read, I really liked the Rebels prelude novel, which was the first one, A New Dawn. It has some clunky stuff in it, but I think John Jackson Miller's a pretty good Star Wars writer. Although his best book is one of the Last Legends books, which is Kenobi, which is about Obi-Wan on Tatooine, and it's just like a Western set on Tatooine. It rules. But there's, but yeah, I've liked a lot of them. There's, they've tried to bring back the short story collections, which is interesting, but they've done it in strange ways. Like there was the Canto Bight collection that was only 4 novellas, which I would have liked to see a more classic Tales of type book with some more stories. And then there was the From a Certain Point of View thing that was all takes place during the runtime of New Hope with side characters and stuff, which I read a couple of those. I haven't read the whole book yet, but it's a fun premise. But yeah.
We will shortly discuss that at the end of the episode with the Wikipedia stuff. That certain point of view comes up in my notes for that. So.
Oh, nice. But yeah, lots of new canon stuff probably was just announced at Celebration. We're ahead of that right now. But, you know, you guys, that happened weeks ago for you guys. Weeks ago! You know, and you heard all that we talked about it on that bonus episode. So,
and you know what else? You know what else though? And a whole lot of new canon books are probably going to be dropped on Triple Force Friday, which definitely hasn't happened yet at the time of this episode.
That's true. Triple Force Friday, where they're celebrating. That's an interesting thing. I mean, we'll talk about this. I'm sure we probably have already talked about this, but I'm curious because that's going to be promoting Episode 9, The Mandalorian, and the game Fallen Order, right?
Yes.
Yes. So,
I think that's the day the game comes out.
So, yeah, I'm very excited about it. I'm sure we're going to get lots of new books, maybe some new books that we can actually review on this podcast, new releases. It'll be a lot of fun.
I agree.
So, but...
You know what I want? You know what I want out of the new canon that we don't have yet? Well, they have that. The only thing that real junior novel, The Adventures in Wild Space, is it called?
Yes.
Is that the name of those? Like, that's the only, like, I feel like series.
No, there's also Join the Resistance.
Okay.
Which is about
I'm unfamiliar with that.
Resistance cadet pilots.
Okay, that could be interesting.
Yeah, there's also that. Those are the 2 series that they've kind of done. I would like to see them do something with. I mean, we'll see after episode 9, like, what's revealed and stuff, but I think maybe something with Luke and Kilo would be a fun...
That would be a good Jedi
I don't know if that'll
too.
happen. I don't know what form they want that to take. I could see that they wanting to do that as an animated series or something like that. But...
Jude Watson should write that series.
They should bring back Jude. Bring back Jude. Bring back
Bring
Jude.
back Jude.
Bring back Jude.
Back Jude.
So that's what we think of the new canon. There's lots of good stuff, but I think there's some untapped potential. I'm curious for the post-episode 9 reality when they don't have to hold so much back, when we have that whole 30-year stretch that's been unfilled by the new canon between New Jedi Order, Jesus Christ, between between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. So there's 30 years there. Come on. We can start filling that up after Abrams unlocks his fucking mystery box. So, when we come back, we're discussing our first new canon novel, Guardians of the Whills!
Guardians of the Whills!
Guardians of the Whills by Greg Rucka! Stay tuned!
Having problems with the truth? Deceptions? Every day? More lies? It's a problem that millions of species have. But now, there's hope. Borgullet. Borgullet is a lie inhibitor prescribed to you by your doctor. Applied directly to the temples, Borgullet is a non-sentient creature that secretes the truth. Borgullet is not for everybody, including women who are or may become pregnant and children under the age of 17. Side effects include rash, redness, burning sensation of the application area, constipation, incontinence, thoughts of suicide, and the tendency to lose one's mind. If you experience a migraine lasting 4 days or more, discontinue taking Borgullet and talk to your doctor immediately, as this may be a sign of a serious life-threatening condition. Talk to your doctor today about Borgullet and see if Borgullet is right for you. Borgullet. Know the truth.
And welcome back to Padawan Library. This week, we are discussing, like we mentioned, our first canon novel, new canon.
Guardians of the Whills.
Guardians of the Whills.
Guardians of the Whills.
Rucka. This book is a prelude to Rogue One. I believe it came out after Rogue One, though. It was not released.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
I think it came out in the spring of 2017. But it was the greatest time in the history of our country, right, Debbie? Right? Yeah. Anyway.
Right.
Oh, God. Anyway, we live in a hellscape.
Dark times. A lot like the setting in this book.
The times depicted in this book. Okay. So, this book is written by Greg Rucka. And Greg Rucka, normally you talk about the author, but I'll talk a little bit about him because I'm very familiar with his work. As far as Star Wars goes, I believe this is only his third or fourth it's his fourth Star Wars thing, because he wrote a comic book miniseries called Shattered Empire. It was one of the first new Marvel Comics miniseries. Then he wrote Before the Awakening, which is a trio of little short stories about...
Which we will probably read closer to episode 9.
Yeah, we'll probably read that one. And then also, I believe he wrote Moving Target, which is a book about Leia that is also in the purview of this podcast, so we might eventually read that. I've read it. It's pretty good. I'm a big fan of Greg Rucka, but not really for his Star Wars books. It's mostly because he is one of the best comic book writers of his generation. He was a great Batman writer, most famous for co-creating the incredible comic book series Gotham Central, which was about the Gotham Police Department and barely featured Batman until DC was like, this book doesn't sell at all. Let's put Batman all through it. He created that with Ed Brubaker and Michael Lark. That's a really good series. And he also created a great comic book called Queen and Country, great spy comic book. And he's just written for everybody, all of the big characters you can think of. He's just a great crime comics writer. Recently, he's been doing this comic book that doesn't come out that often, but is really great, also with Michael Lark, called Lazarus, that is just awesome. I haven't kept up with it the last couple years, but it's very good. He's a great writer. Star Wars, I'm kind of surprised that he has been pegged as the young reader's writer for Star Wars. He's written 3 young readers' novels, including this one. Because he mostly wrote relatively adult or mature-themed comics, so I would have expected... And he also writes, I believe he writes, like, crime and spy fiction.
Yeah, the Atticus Kodiak series.
Yes.
That's actually like how he got his job, how he got started into writing, which has 7 main books and 6 spin-off books, and he drew from his experience as an EMT and martial arts experience to give the books a realism which they've been praised for.
Yeah, and I like this book. I think is very, very well written. It's not I don't want to spoil any of my thoughts generally, but it doesn't necessarily give you the full range of his talents, and I hope that if you guys read this book for this podcast that and you liked it or loved it or didn't like it or didn't love it, whatever, that you give his other stuff a chance, because he's a very, very good writer, great comic book writer, and a very solid prose stylist as well. So, but anyway, so what, did you find dig up any other details?
Well, I did find out, this is odd. So you mentioned Gotham Central, and he was featured. Greg Rucka himself was featured as a character in a CSI comic called "Dying in the Gutters," which takes place at a comic book convention where the Rucka character, this is from what I understand, accidentally kills a comic book gossip columnist while trying to kill Joe Chiesda. Is that someone you know?
Joe Quesada.
Yeah,
he was the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics at the time.
Yeah, and he was trying to kill him over his perceived role in the cancellation of Gotham Central. I thought that was a little odd, a little weird that they would tie that into such a real-world thing
also,
and
Quesada
say that,
was
like,
not the editor of DC Comics. Oh, I think I know. This is very old bullshit, but Quesada launched a book at Marvel that he actually drew called NYX. That was the introduction of the character of X-23, actually, and that book was kind of also about like cops in the Marvel universe. And at least initially, when it actually came out, because it got super delayed, if I remember correctly, but the first issue outsold Gotham Central, and that's, I think, part of why DC forced them to put more Batman into Gotham Central. Anyway, lots of 15-year-old comic book gossip.
Also, do you want to know what he claims are his favorite movies?
Oh, what are Greg Rucka's favorite films?
Okay, he lists 3. The 2 are good, but the third one I find interesting. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Okay.
Silence of the Lambs.
Right.
And The Conversation, the Francis Ford Coppola movie with Gene Hackman, edited by Walter Murch.
Yes.
Great movie, not one that you see named often as somebody's favorite movie, but an excellent movie.
He has great taste. Lots of these comic book writers have good taste in movies. And those are all 3 great movies. So I know you're not a big fan of Butch Cassidy, but we don't need to litigate that again.
But hey, shout out to Walter Murch, first Murch reference on this podcast.
Yeah, a legend, a true Lucasfilm legend. Co-wrote THX, designed the sound for it. American Graffiti. Directed a Clone Wars
an episode of Yep.
So. Anyway, but that's Greg Rucka. I think he's very talented. This book is about Chirrut Imwe and Baze... What's his last name?
Malbus, I think.
Baze Malbus, you're right. Baze Malbus from Rogue One. They're the 2 Guardians of the Whills on the planet Jeddah. You remember these characters from Rogue One, right, Levi?
I do. I liked these characters from Rogue One. That's why I was excited to read this book, this prelude to Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
I like these characters too. I want to make clear that I think we talked about Rogue One in our first episode a little bit. I'm not the biggest fan of that movie. I think the biggest problem is the characters. I don't think are very memorable, but they're all interesting ideas for characters. So... to take it back to what we were talking about in the first part of this episode, the book Catalyst by James Luceno, which is a direct prequel to Rogue One and is about Galen Erso and Lyra Erso, who are Jyn Erso's parents, as well as about Orson Krennic. So that book, I read that before Rogue One came out, and it got me so excited for Rogue One because I loved these characters. 2 of whom died. One of whom died in the first scene, and the other one died halfway through pretty unceremoniously. And the other one honestly wasn't in it as much as I expected. So, but that book is great, and I will maintain that book is superior to Rogue One.
I agree with you, because I read that book after the fact. After the movie came out, and I agree, that book is better than Rogue One.
So, this book, I was pretty excited to check it out. I always wanted to read it, but, I hadn't gotten around to it, and this podcast gave me an excuse. Because I thought these characters were cool. Donnie Yen is awesome, and there's a lot of great scenes with them, but there's just not enough time spent with them for me to like get myself attached to them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
it does. Now something real quick. Catalyst is great because Catalyst goes all the way back to during the Clone Wars. It starts at the Clone Wars are still going on at the beginning of that book, and then we have the whole Rise of the Empire and everything. So that book goes way back. What were you expecting? Like, what did you want out of this book before we get into it?
Well, I was what I wanted and what I expected were somewhat two different things. If this were an adult novel that had 300 or 400 pages to work with, I believe 300 or 400 real pages, I should say, because I think this book is like around 240, right? Something like that.
Yeah, and it's double space.
But
so
it's double
it's
space, illustrations, lots of blank pages with just quotes on them and stuff. So it's really closer. It's not that far off from like a Jedi Apprentice length. It might be a little longer. But I would say if this were a full like adult novel, then my expectation would be something more like Catalyst. Because the setting of Jeddah in the movie I thought was very intriguing but very untapped. I was like, okay, so what is this place? Like, is it a Jedi holy city? Or what is it? It's not very clear in the movie. So, the fact, I'm glad that I now know that Chirrut and Baze are not Jedi, because it is not clear in that movie whether they're Jedi
really
or
not.
some other form of spirituality, which is what they are, and we'll talk about that. But, so I will say this book, I would have liked to have seen more from before the Empire occupied Jeddah. But in the scope of this story, is kind of what I expected. I expected more of a small... And I also had read Before the Awakening, which is a somewhat different project, but also has kind of these small-scale stories that just kind of reveal some more of the character of these characters from the movies. And I'm not surprised that that's largely what this book is. But it does fully enrich these characters that are largely blank in the movie. Cool performances, cool presence, cool scenes, but you don't know anything about them, really.
Right.
So, in a larger novel, I would have wanted a more kind of sweep to it, like Catalyst had, where you see Jeddah before the occupation and after. But as it stands for the kind of book that we're talking about, and this is a standalone book, so it's not like Jedi Apprentice where you can have that sweep because you're telling a giant story over several books. This is a standalone story. I thought this kind of, and I don't want to get into like final thoughts or anything, but I thought this met kind of what I expected, if not what I would like my dream scenario would be.
I agree, 100%. And something else I don't like is you basically just have to draw the conclusion that this book is very close to the events of Rogue One, because in these new canon books, there's no timeline at the beginning of the books like there would be in old canon books, where they would tell you exactly where it fell in context with a year, but they don't do that in these books.
Yeah, they kind of tell you just where it takes place kind of relative to, like, if it's before and after a movie, basically. I didn't look it up on Wikipedia. Is there not, like, a exact time for it?
I didn't look it up either.
I will be looking that up right now, because this is information our listeners must know.
They need to know how many years ABY is it?
Well, they don't use that dating system anymore.
What do they use now?
I don't know, but I remember reading. I think they've changed the dating system.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't make a lot of sense, to be fair. It would probably be, like, in universe, it doesn't make much sense as an in universe thing.
Yeah, the timeline should be like roughly, pre and post Clone Wars.
Here we are. It's roughly 6 months before Rogue One. So
okay,
there you go. That makes sense.
Which is 0 ABY.
Yes.
If by the old timeline system.
That is true. 0 ABY. Or is it just, 3 days ABY? What if we went into Rogue One and the first thing we saw was a chyron on the screen that said 3 days BBY. 3 days BBY. It would be a delight. Everybody would love it.
It would be.
Everybody would love it.
It would get me way more hype. It would get me way more hype than the long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and then the sudden cut to just a ship flying through space. I really do not like the opening of that movie. I wish there was something else done there, and I think Solo fixed that problem. Solo did that much better.
I prefer the Solo titles. I will say I kind of wanted to rewatch Rogue One for this.
Same, and I didn't.
I did not. I read the book. I just finished the book about an hour and a half ago, 2 hours ago. So I have been unable to cram that in before recording because I actually haven't seen it since the theater. I saw it twice in the theater, but it's not my favorite Star Wars movie. We talked about that already. But this book did make me kind of want to go back and watch it.
And let's just say real quick, it's not our favorite Star Wars movie. I'm pretty sure it's near both of our bottom of our list, like right above Clone Wars. Right. But like, even though it's on the bottom of that list, doesn't mean we don't like the movie.
We like we love all Star Wars. This is a positive Star Wars podcast. We all like Star Wars. I enjoy all of them to one degree or another. This is my least favorite, but I've now read 2 prequel books. I'm excited for the Diego Luna miniseries. What's his character's name? I'm blanking.
Cassian Andor. I am excited for that too.
I'm excited for that miniseries. I like everything. I'm a big fan. I will read eventually the Jyn Erso novel, Rebel Rising.
Yeah.
I'll get to it eventually. So anyway. We better get started because we're now.
Yes, we better get into.
We're like about a half hour in, so and there's a lot of stuff to get to. So, this book starts off. It's in between each chapter. There's quotes. These kind of
like poems.
There's a poem that starts this, but there's other quotes and stuff like that throughout the book, interspersed in between each chapter, and they're collected. Edited by Kozem Pell, who is a disciple of the Whills in the book Collected Poems, Prayers, and Meditations on the Force. So the first quote, and I'll read this one. We're not going to read every quote, but I'm going to read this one because it starts the book off. That which surrounds us binds us. In our connection to one, all is connected. This is the truth of the Force, no more, no less. Life binds the living. That which rises must fall, and that which falls must rise. From the first breath of the infant to the last breath of the aged, we are one together. And that was written by Kiru Hali, the sage of Unuhaka. And again, you can find that in the Collected Poems, Prayers, and Meditations on the Force, edited by Kozem Pell, disciple of the Whills. So anyway, Chapter 1, it starts with Chirrut Imwe. If you don't remember, he's Donnie Yen. He's the blind guy from Rogue One. And he's there on Jedha. He's approached by a character named Sylvani Fest, character you don't need to really know much about, but I'll tell you a bunch about her. She is an Anomid from the planet Yablari, who had come to Jedha on a pilgrimage, I guess. Doesn't have any vocal cords. These aliens don't have any vocal cords. They communicate through hand and body language. But she uses a vocoder to communicate more directly with most beings, and she before the fall, or before the occupation, used to sing prayers at the Temple of the Kyber, which is the temple that Chirrut was a guardian of the Whills. A lot here. The Empire, when they occupied Jedha, they raided the temple, removed artifacts, they barred the entrances, people can't even go inside. But a few disciples of the Whills remain, including Sylvani. And the only guardians of the temple, who are kind of the leaders of the temple, remain are Chirrut and his friend Baze Malbus, who you also know from Rogue One. And Chirrut is a stubborn guy. He's been steadfast in his faith in the Whills, I guess, in the Force, which is and the disciples of the Whills are kind of a separate Force-based religion. They're not Jedi. So, and Baze has kind of lost his faith. He's since the occupation began, he's long-suffering. He's annoyed by Chirrut, but clearly there's a great love and bond there that can't be broken. So Silvani tells Chirrut about a mysterious man who has appeared at the temple. She and her fellow disciples, they believe that he will bring violence, or stormtroopers will come. And the temple, by the way, in the shadow of the temple. They can't get into the temple, but the temple's huge, and so there's a huge wall they can all gather by without much Empire interference. So, this guy that has shown up at the temple, he claims to be a Jedi, and Baze is like, nice try. He's incredulous about this. Of course he's not a Jedi. And Chirrut, he refuses cash payment. He only asks for food or water to deal with the stranger. Now, let's do some background on the city of Jeddah. The holy city of Jeddah has been home to many different faiths, including the Brotherhood of the Beatific Countenance, the firmest of the world sinners of grace, the followers of the central Isopter, the disciples of the Whills, and the disciples of the Whills. They held prominence because of the Temple of the Khyber, which is the largest temple in the city. And there was much balance. And the Empire has disturbed this balance. Pilgrimages have slowed to a trickle. Resources have dried up. And Chirrut, he senses fear. He goes out with Silvani to meet with this mysterious stranger. He senses fear amongst the people of Jeddah. They arrive at the temple. Several disciples, they're gathered around, along with this mystery man. One of the disciples' names is Angber Trell. I'm not sure if you guys need to know that, but you should know it. And then Baze immediately feels that it can't be a Jedi. He's like, nice try, this is not a Jedi. The dude is ranting loudly, Angber Trell, he's like, you might attract stormtroopers, and he's just like, it doesn't matter, I'm a Jedi, I will save you, follow me. And Chirrut, he's centering himself, he does that kind of I am one with the Force chant that you guys might remember from Rogue One. And then he tells Baze he's not a Jedi. Well, actually, let's keep in mind, Chirrut, he's not a Jedi. He's not even a Force user, quote unquote. He feels the Force around him. He strives for enlightenment. And Chirrut, he feels the Force. He confirms Baze's suspicion that he's not a Jedi. Baze is like, I already knew that. You didn't need to use the Force. I don't believe in this wackiness. I don't believe in it. And so the dude asks Chirrut to join him and make the Imperials pay. And Chirrut's like, okay, my dude, first of all, what's your name? And his name is Wernad. Wernad is his name.
Wernad.
Yes, Wernad. Chirrut refuses to help Wernad overthrow the Imperials because they might sacrifice the innocent. Wernad, he was brought here to work in the mines. Chirrut figures this all out. He intuits this. And his co-workers in the mines, they're all, as he says, with the Force now. So they all died. Chirrut, he's like, I know you're not a Jedi. Nice try, Wernad. He's like, I'm going to sit down. All the other disciples sit down. And even Baze sits down in this circle. And he asks Wernad to sit down. And Wernad's like, I have to do something, Wernad repeated. We are doing something, Chirrut said. We are keeping faith. So,
So, if you're still listening and still follow that, we're currently on page 22.
Okay. That's the first chapter. I got very passionate there for a second. There was just a lot of stuff I had to get through. People needed to know all this background information, Levi, and I
agree, because this book does that a lot, where it goes into details about characters that we don't need information on.
It's true. I will say this, though. What I like about it, and maybe it's just because it improves I think it'll improve my experience with Rogue One when I rewatch it, is I will say, the information on the setting is very welcome. It is, and I think is necessary and should have been included in some fashion. They should have figured out some way for it to be included in Rogue One itself. That's why you know what? We could use an opening crawl. It's not like any of these movies matter anyway. They're not made by George Lucas. So, it's not like it's some great sacred thing you're violating. It's like episodes 7 and 8 have opening crawls, and that's fine. Nobody's mad about that. Anyway, so, but regardless, the only character, I will say, I actually think the only character in this book, and weirdly the character that it begins with, Sylvani Fest, is the only character I think that is introduced that doesn't pay off in some way, that the background of the character doesn't pay off in some way. Again, I think, like a lot of books we talk about on the show, because of the limited page count, I think this book rushes a few things narratively and all that stuff. And might have benefited from being a longer book. But Sylvani is really the only example that I have a particular issue with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because she just doesn't show up again. We never see her again.
That's true.
And all of this stuff about how she sings her prayers and everybody at the temple stares because it's just so beautiful with her vocoder device that the voice is just, it had to have been heard. But, I don't know. Let's keep moving on. All right, chapter 2. We have a long way to go. This is the poem at the beginning of chapter 2. I perceive in all things this truth, that we are forever bound to the Force, and that the Force forever binds us together. What we do to one, we therefore do to all, and thus it is upon us to grant all what we would wish for ourselves. That was written by Karian Ivan, one of the sisters of Sarva, and that, of course, is from the Collected Poems, Prayers, and Meditations of the Force, edited by Kozempel, a disciple of the Whills. So, in this chapter, after their sit-in, Baze and Chirrut go back to their apartment. They're hungry, and Baze starts going through the cabinets looking for food. Normally, they would stop in the market on their way home and pick something up, but today, an insurgent sent off a explosive, and in retaliation, the Empire raided the market and killed 12 people, thus meaning the market was closed. So there is no food in the house. All they have is Terran tea, and Terran tea, Baze hates Terran tea. He thinks it's a disgusting tea, but he settles on it because it's all that they have. And then the book goes into so we discussed a little bit how Baze is he's mad all the time. He's mad about the tea. He's mad about the Empire. He's talking to Chirrut about Wernad, and he says that he has the right to be mad. And this is something Baze says. He was not wrong, Baze said.
You speak of Wernad, the one in the old shadows.
Yes, he was not wrong.
Perhaps he was the wrong man to do it.
Is that your place, to say who will fight and who will not?
No more than it is yours to watch over me.
Baze finished his tea, made a face at his empty cup, and set it aside. They have destroyed our home, Baze said. They have destroyed the homes of so many others, and I understand his rage.
I know, Chirrut said, and Baze thought that was the end of it. But then Chirrut added, "So do I."
So that goes to show that these characters have no love for the Empire. Um, Now we move into a side about the Star Destroyer that is stationed above Jeddah. You may remember in the movie that it was hovering just above the city, currently where we're at 6 months before in 0 BBY, 3 days before. Whatever. The Star Destroyer is currently in orbit above Jeddah. You can just see it in the sky.
6 months BBS. 6 months before the Battle of Scarif.
So it's sitting in orbit, and the whole reason it's there is because Jeddah sits atop of a mesa, and the city has built all the way to the edges of this mesa. So there's no room in the city. They only have one landing platform. So the Star Destroyer is there because the stormtroopers need somewhere to stay, and if they stayed on the ground, then obviously they'd be targets. So they have to have a place for stormtroopers to stay, and they have to supply them with food and water because, of course, there's no food and clean water in the city of Jeddah. So we jump to Baze and Chirrut. They're outside, I think, on their balcony, and they are watching for ships come down from the Star Destroyer. Chirrut looks at Baze and he says he found it, and Baze needs his binoculars to confirm it. This is something, too, where Chirrut is a running motif is Chirrut says something like, "Oh, Wernad's not a Jedi," but like Baze always has to like visually confirm it, regardless of what Chirrut says. So they know that there is a cargo ship coming down with supplies, ammo, food, and water, and the two of them go after it. Baze gets his gun, an E5, a heavily modified gun that eats up ammo, and there's no stun setting. And as a former Guardian, Baze is conflicted with killing in anger, but he cannot. But not if he could help it. But I don't even know what I wrote here. But it doesn't make a difference. Basically, he doesn't like killing, but he knows he has to because it's for a greater good. So they. The cargo ship is like going down the middle of the street, and Chirrut is standing in the middle of the road, and he's dropped his stick on the ground, and they pull up, and a stormtrooper's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm blind. I just dropped my stick." And the guy's like, "Get out of the way!" And from like a rooftop, Baze jumps out, blasts all the stormtroopers away, and they take the cargo and they go to Dennick's garage, and it's also noted that the capacitor system on Baze's gun has melted. The gun is useless. Chapter 3.
So, Dennick, I don't know if you talked about this, Dennick was the one who tipped them off about this shipment that they stole, and she agreed to tell them about it as long as they would give any weapons or anything like that to her, and they could take whatever was left, which was what they wanted, which was the food and the water. And so Baze and Chirrut, they take this shipment over to an orphanage, which is run by two sisters, Killy Gim and Kaya Gim. Killy is older and is sick. She's coughing a lot throughout this book, and she was kind of a spiritual mentor, it seems like, to Chirrut to some degree. She was a disciple of the Whills, and she decides that she's going to distribute the food and the water to the children of the orphanage, and she's not going to take any for herself because it can make it last longer for them. Her sister Kaya, who is 10 years younger, she had a droid repair shop back in the day, and it's been converted to an orphanage since the Empire got there because there actually was apparently no need for an orphanage on Jeddah before the Empire got there. There was apparently not a significant homelessness issue or problem. And there's about a dozen children there between the ages of 6 and 10.
It includes humans, Rhodians, Twi'leks, and more Syrians. And this is, I guess, the fourth time that Baze and Chirrut have robbed supplies for the orphanage. They observe Kaya in a classroom with the children teaching, and afterwards they kind of run out and they get into a discussion with her. She says the food's going to last another few weeks, and Baze promises more before then. The Empire is apparently looking to punish someone for the heists, and they're willing to take that risk. And Chirrut and Kaya, they talk about the cycle of violence and how it must break.
Yes, and Kaya, she looks at the two of them and she says, "What will you do when they catch you? What will you do when they break you? What will you become?" That she didn't actually say that. That is a line from the trailer for Rogue One, a Saw Gerrera line that actually was not in the movie, but I quoted it every time I saw the trailer.
It's great.
Moving on, Chapter 4. So Baze and Chirrut are walking down the street, and Baze is yearning for a new gun. And Chirrut's like, "You have a gun. Use your gun from when you were a Guardian." And he's like, "Nope, I can't use it. I still have it, but I can't use it." So they're walking down the street, and they realize that they are being followed by a Twi'lek and a Sabbat. And these two are keeping their distance from them, and they notice they must have a way of communicating with each other because they seem to know which way to go, so they know it's not their common thieves. So they're followed into Hopper Town, where the streets are narrow and the alleys between the buildings are even narrower. As they're walking through, they see a large battalion of stormtroopers rolling in. So they decide to duck down an alley, but Baze immediately, he's like, "Oh no, I won't fit." And the two of them start to argue over the fact, because Chirrut thinks Baze can fit, and Baze is like, "It's not happening." And a stormtrooper notices them, and Chirrut already is like a red flag because he still wears his robes, his Guardian robes. So Baze knows that he's just like a moving target. So Baze shoves Chirrut down the alley, and he takes off running. And he ends up going to Dennick's garage. And here we get some backstory about Dennick and how she's a pilot, but probably she was more of a smuggler who burned one too many bridges in the corporate sector. That's how she ended up on Jedha. And Baze reminisces about how he met her over Melaroon fruit, as seen in Jedi Apprentice Book 1, The Rising Force. And basically the story is
it's
just
not
there
actually
to...
seen in Jedi Apprentice.
Oh,
I wrote that into the sketch that we wrote about Jedi Apprentice #1.
I gotcha.
The first time I encountered that was in Star Wars Rebels, I believe, the first episode or second episode.
Okay, so it's a new canon fruit. Darn.
Yeah.
Fancy me not having looked that up. So she mentions the cargo they stole is actually loaded with some heavy Imperials munitions, and it's like such heavy duty stuff she can't get rid of it. So Baze, he's just like, "Well, show me." And he opens this crate and he sees this a gun. It's actually a cannon, and she says this is a gun that you would actually mount to like the back of a speeder. It's full automatic and it can shoot 40,000 rounds before being reloaded. And Baze is just like, "Oh, I like this." And he's like, "What is this thing used for?" And she goes, "It would be for crowd control." So Baze is like, "Well, I'm taking this." And he pressures Dennick to rig up a harness so that he can carry the coolant tank for the gun on his back, and it also has like a bandolier for the ammo. This, of course, is the large and clunky looking gun that he uses in the movie Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. So we have this. So this is how we expand on the universe, explaining this massive gun that Baze carries around. So after nightfall, he figures the fuzz is off him. He heads home, and he walks into their apartment and finds Chirrut serving tea to the Twi'lek and Sabbat who were following them earlier. And we learn here that the Twi'lek, His name is Beezer Fortuna.
Is he Bib's boy? Is he Bib's boy?
They're cousins. They're cousins. It's Bib and Beezer, cousins. The Fortuna cousins.
Is this true?
Yes, they are. They are cousins. And Beezer is, you cannot see Beezer in Rogue One. He was actually a person that they made a makeup for. As described in the book, he is like a real emaciated looking kind of Twi'lek, like he's super pale. And you can definitely see that in the makeup for Beezer Fortuna. He shows up in the visual dictionary, of course, for the book. And then the other dude, the Sabbat, is Levan Tensna, and they refer to themselves as rebels and emissaries. But emissaries for who? And that's when they say, "Oh, we're going to take you to meet him." Chapter 5.
Who could it be? So here we are.
Who?
Chapter 5. So the duo, Baze and Chirrut. I started writing the duo, so I'm going to call them the duo. They get into a speeder with Fortuna and Tenza, and the mysterious person is driving. Chirrut can't, suss out anything about them. He can't sense fully who they are. He just knows somebody else is driving. And they leave the city, and they leave the mesa and they hit the desert floor. And Chirrut notices Baze's new gun, and there's a little banter back and forth there. And they're escorted. They stop the speeder and they're escorted by many masked figures. Baze talks about, says we're surrounded by them. There's tons of them. And they head to, is it the Three Faces? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, and I think in the movie, these are like the statues that are like laying on the ground. They're like toppled over statues that look like they're Jedi.
Yes, you're right about this.
Yes.
All right, so they get there and they're escorted by all these people, and it turns out, of course, to be Saw Gerrera, obviously. And he asks them, he wants them to join his fight against the Empire, or he wants them to join his fight against the Empire. And so Baze is very impressed by this display. And Chirrut is not unmoved, but he's naturally suspicious of someone like Saw, who seems very radical, very much obsessive. And so it's an interesting offer. And Fortuna, he takes them back to their place, and he gives Chirrut a metal tube that can be used to reach him. And Baze makes it clear that he wants to join Saw's crusade, and he was saying, this gun that I have, this new gun, like the purpose of this gun, why would they bring it to Jeddah? Not just for security. This is as what the fuck is her name?
Dennick.
Yeah. This is not just for security. As Dennick said earlier, it's for crowd control. So Chirrut, he's still more hesitant. He doesn't trust Saw. And Baze says, I don't trust him either, but I do believe him. And Chirrut says, I get what you mean, basically. So it's a very... they're kind of in limbo here. There's a disagreement, but it's a dispute of kins, as I like to say. Two people that have reasonable... arguments on both sides. A dispute of kins!
Now, talk about Saw real quick. Saw is a character who I enjoy. I think the Forrest Whitaker performance is insanely funny. I quote all the time, oh crap, what's the name of the creature that like reads, what is his name, Brody's mind?
Yeah, something like that.
Bookaloo, he knows the truth!
So,
the only side effect is that one tends to lose one's mind.
So, actually, I'd be curious, because do you have any... have you gotten to any of the Saw stuff in Clone Wars yet?
Yes, and I was just about to. Oh, not in Clone Wars. I did just get to how Saw is related to a certain Episode 1 character's death in the Leia book. So that is a major mark on Saw Gerrera for me. For that act of his. So I've taken Saw down a notch, but continue with the Clone Wars. I did not get to that.
Well, the
no.
Clone Wars arc that he's in, I think it's in season 5. So you might be a bit off from that, but that's one of the best arcs. He's home planet of Onderon, and it's him and his sister, and it's Ahsoka and Anakin helping out with this kind of rebellion on Onderon during the Clone Wars, and something tragic happens, and it really starts to turn Saw, and you can see how you get from the guy. He's a very idealistic young, freedom fighter who, you can see how you get from him to the guy in Rogue One, certainly, but in this book, and even you get to see him again in Rebels too, and actually voiced by Forrest Whitaker in that too. So, it's I think he's a really great character. I think he's one of the and as they advertised when they were promoting Rogue One, a George Lucas created character.
Yeah, I appreciated that so much. You have no idea.
They
now hang on. I'm going to assume that his sister is killed, correct?
Yes, I didn't want to spoil it for you, but I figured our audience knew that.
Interesting that just like Gerrera Deirdre, another Gerrera, his sister gets killed.
Yes. Oh, fascinating. Gerrera spelled differently in both.
Yes, it is.
But yeah, and I who knows? Maybe somebody at the Lucasfilm office was playing a little prank, like, oh, why don't you name him Gerrera? I don't know if Leland Chee was snickering to himself in the corner. God.
These are things that I'm sure happen at Lucasfilm all the time. All right, I'm moving on. From this moment, I step into my next. From this place, I step into my next. From this life, I step into my next. For I am one with the Force, forever and ever. A Coixian prayer for the departed, from Collected Poems and Prayers and Meditations on the Force, edited by Kozem Pell, disciple of the Whills. So, Baze and Chirrut go to visit the orphanage again, only to discover that the doors have been blown open. They head inside and find the place empty. When they step outside, there are 5 stormtroopers waiting for them. And the stormtroopers say, yo, the orphanage is closed for possessing stolen Imperial property. So they converse with the stormtroopers, and the troopers want to know why they were in there. And Baze and Chirrut want to know where the orphans are. And the head trooper says, why would she know? Why would we take orphans as prisoners? We're not monsters. So they do give a little bit of cred to the Empire in this book. So this tells Chirrut and Baze that Killian Kea and the children got away. So in this moment, while they're standing there, Baze notices that Chirrut has a subtle shift in his hand placement on his staff, and that tells him it's go time. And between the two of them, they easily kill the 5 troopers. So they go in search of in Jeddah for the orphans and their lost friends, and find them hiding out in the north part of the city, which is the less populated part of town, hiding out in an abandoned house that Baze, one day while strolling through this part of town, saw this abandoned house, and he told Killian Kea about it, and he's like, hey, that would be a great new location for an orphanage. So clearly they took his advice and they moved there. So the Gim sisters tell them about how the stormtroopers showed up and accused them of stealing the Imperial cargo, even though the stormtroopers themselves were kind of given that air that, no, there's no way these guys did it. So instead of arresting them, they kicked them out on the streets and let them go. Orphanage is closed, get the F out. Now, she does tell her, though, that one of the orphans, a Torgruda, which just so happens to be the same species as Ahsoka and Shakti, she ran under the bed, and a stormtrooper forcibly removed her by grabbing one of her montrails and struck her. And I don't know if you know anything about Torgrudas, Tim, but their montrails are hollow and are used for sensing and perceiving the world. So they let him know that this girl is fine. She's traumatized, but she'll heal. But that is some brutality, stormtrooper brutality there, beating a child. So Chirrut and Baze know that the orphans don't have the necessities they need. There's only one bathroom in the house. They don't have food or blankets. So they step outside and they know what they have to do. They hit the comm that they were given to call Saw, and they said they will join Saw in his fight as long as he can provide food, water, meds, and blankets for the orphans.
Chapter 7. So, they agreed to help Saw, and and Chapter 7 structured in an interesting way. It's been 2 months. It starts off in media res, 2 months after, and the duo, they've joined Saw, and they've started making these strategic attacks on the Kyber crystal mines, which has been what the Empire is. They've been, deriving the most. They've been taking huge sums of it, these non-renewable resources for the planet of Jeddah. They're raping the land, as they say. So, Chirrut, we see Chirrut in the middle of one of these sorts of operations, and he's very conflicted about it, because he wants to strike back against the Empire, but this increased openness about striking back against the Empire has brought a lot more scrutiny onto Jeddah, a lot more battle damage, a lot more lives lost on all sides of the conflict. And so he's sad and he reflects, and we get a flashback here now to the first meeting they have with Beezer Fortuna and a Mephitian named Colby Sperato. And so they make these plans to set up these plans to blow up these Kyber crystal mines. And Chirrut, he says, I'm gonna help with this, and right away questioned by Beezer. So he says, I don't mean to offend, but you're blind. Chirrut put a hand up in front of his face, waved it back and forth, gasped. Oh, man, what a joker he is. Nice try, Joaquin. Try again next time. So, he says, Baze Malbus, he said, why didn't you tell me? Jack Nicholson, it's time. Stay retired. Stay retired, Jack. So, anyway, Baze laughed. Fortuna didn't. Don't mistake his lack of eyesight for a lack of vision, Baze said. So even though there's been this kind of conflict between Baze and Chirrut throughout the book, there's clearly a deep respect there. So,
yes.
The meeting ends, and Chirrut is walking with Sperato, the Colby Sperato, this Mephitian who was also at the meeting, and he's walking towards the Old Shadows, which is by the old Temple of the Kyber. He asks Sperato where he's from. He says, I was on Saralonis, Sperato said, when I was recruited. I do not know the world, responds Chirrut, and he says, just a place. We all have a place. Sperato thought about that, then asked, if you lose that place? You cannot lose what is inside you, Chirrut said. You can only misplace it. The task then is to find it again. And so they kind of go back, and he he says, why don't you talk to these people here in the shadows, see if you can find something there. And the next morning, he asks, how did that go? And Sperato says, I'm still looking for my place. Chirrut wishes him luck. So even though Chirrut's clearly a very deeply religious man about his specific faith, he's willing to expose people to it, but he's also happy that everybody's on their own journey towards enlightenment. And so they meet up with everyone, and Fortuna is still doubting Chirrut. This is all, remember, the first mission. And Baze is excited, but he's unsure about the reliability of his new gun. He's like, it could blow up in my hands, he says. It could explode in my hands! So, they detonate the mine, and a stormtrooper is behind, and there's a speeder flying away with Sperato and a human, an unidentified human, and the stormtrooper... there's a stormtrooper that pops up in the back seat, and he has a blaster on the human. And Chirrut, he senses this, he fires, hits the stormtrooper, saving that life. And Fortuna sees this, and he apologizes for doubting him. He's like, I can't believe I doubted you. So, flashing forward back to the 2 months later that this chapter started with, at home, they're at home, and Baze tells Chirrut about another successful mine attack. And Chirrut questions how successfully this new war that Saw Gerrera has waged, has actually deterred the Empire. That it's actually just brought more Imperial scrutiny onto Jeddah, and the orphanage has doubled in size, doubled in population. There's now 24 kids as opposed to 12 2 months earlier. That means more people are dying, more children without a home. And it's interesting because at this point it gets into this kind of thing where it's like, sure, it's clearly conflicted about the war, but he's drawing some weird false equivalences between Saw's troops and the Empire that I get a little bit tired of in some expanded universe and novel stuff, because they want to so subvert the kind of good versus evil, black and white nature of the films, that it's like, oh, well. But let's remember that the Empire is an oppressive regime, like a truly oppressive regime. And while Saw's methods are definitely extreme, some of the philosophizing in this book about how he's just as bad is a little bit dubious in my mind. But
I agree.
I think it's clearly been kind of a mandate of the new canon to create sympathetic Imperial characters, and I think that's been a good thing generally, but I do think it's also important, especially in this moment we're in our actual real life, that an organization, even a fictional one like the Galactic Empire, is called out for what it is, which is a totalitarian system that is designed around keeping entire swaths of people under their foot. So I think this is an important theme of Star Wars, always has been, but it's not. There's never been a time where it's more important for Star Wars in its lifetime than right now. And that's all I'll say about it. But I appreciate the nuance, but I also think some harder line stuff about the Galactic Empire, not just the bad guys, but the Galactic Empire, needs to be shown. That's all I'm saying. But anyway, Baze goes to leave. Chirrut, he wants to tag along. He's like, no, I'm going to go see Saw by myself, Saw Gerrera. He's seeing him by himself. So that's the end of that very long chapter.
Yes. So chapter 8, Baze goes to meet Saw, and they go to the Three Faces statue, whatever you want to call it, and they sit together under the stars, and Saw offers Baze a drink, and Baze says he'll drink anything as long as it's not Terran tea, hearty har har har.
He hates Terran tea, man.
So Saw pulls out a flask, and which we all know how like Saw is like kind of like a cyborg character, and they mentioned that the flask is clipped to like the back of his like armor on his back. So like I think it's silly that like Saw Gerrera just like walks around with like a flask dangling from him at all times. Regardless, it's just something silly, I thought. So Saw pulls out this flask, and it's filled with his homemade Odoron juice, Bachata.
Onderon, my guy.
Onderon. I didn't get to that episode of Clone Wars yet. I only made it like halfway through season 3, and now I have to wait till Disney Plus comes out so I can finish and catch up with the new season. Anyway, so they are drinking the Bachata, something like that. They trade sips, and Saw reminisces about his home planet, which he says is gone. And Baze is like, well, the planet's still there. But he's like, no, the Empire, it destroyed any culture or tradition that it had. The Empire wants everything to be the same. And there's this moment here where Saw talks about, like, stormtroopers. And he says, think about it, Gerrera continued. Think about stormtroopers. And Baze says, I try not to. They are meant to look the same, yes? Identical. Forget the variations of their duties or assignments. One looks like the other. There is a genius to it. I take your son, your daughter. I put them in armor. Do you dare rise up? Would you shoot your brother? Your mother? You cannot know beneath the armor. Faceless, or rather, the face of the Empire, expressionless, almost featureless, yet ominous. Join, and you are just another anonymous citizen, but you belong. And if you do not, you must be eliminated. And I thought that was the best Saw writing in this book, and I really, really wanted to do a Saw impression, so I appreciate your applause, Tim. I was afraid it was going to come off as kind of Italian, but I must have been convincing.
It's a nonsense accent that doesn't exist, which I appreciate. Forrest, he created a new accent. Why should people in space have Earth accents? Who knows?
I know,
Why
right?
Nemoidians. I guess if you want to go all the way.
I mean,
yeah.
I think the worst of this in Clone Wars is, do you remember the Lurmen? They were these like little. It's like season 2, I think, and they're like these little short, like, I don't know, kind of like lemur looking characters.
Yes, I remember.
But they have a very, very thick Irish accent, and we will not fight. We are a peaceful people. That's how they sound. So anyway, Baze talks about hope and how the Empire stays to crush hope. But hope is a very small thing, and it doesn't need much to survive. And Saw says, you sound like your friend. And that he admires his friend for his dedication to his faith, which earlier, I don't know if you mentioned it, but like Chirrut thinks he makes Saw uncomfortable, but it turns out Saw actually thinks he's a cool dude. But finally, they get around to talking about the orphans.
Well, I guess they're both zealots of a kind, so he can appreciate a similar zeal, you know.
Yes. So they start talking about the orphans, and Baze is like, there are more orphans than ever. We're making more of them. So he tells Saw a plan that he's thinking, and Saw listens. And when he finishes, Saw says, we can do that. So they don't tell you what the plan is. You're going to find out in the coming chapters.
So, Chapter 9, next day, Star Destroyer above the planet enters the atmosphere. And, walkers are sent and deployed to every mine, and TIE fighters are patrolling the skies. It's a crazy situation. 3 X-Wings that people assume are from Saw Gerrera. They show up and they engage the TIE fighters, but they very quickly get overwhelmed because the Star Destroyer deploys a swarm of them, and so the battle, it's crazy, all kinds of craziness. The city is being wrecked, and it continues into the night. The battle continues into the night. Very short chapter.
Yes. All right. So now we are on chapter 10. And as this commotion is going on, we find Churrit carrying a Rhodian boy, Althin, in his arms. And the boy's arm is broken, and Churrit is trying to get him to the orphanage. And in this passage, Churrit gives in to his anger that's been building inside of him. He's angry at the Empire. He's angry with Saw. He's angry with Baze, who he currently doesn't know the whereabouts of. He thinks he's off fighting with Saw's crew, and Saw's crew just keeps fighting the Empire, which causes the Empire to just retaliate every time, causing all of this pain and suffering, because Saw's just making things worse. So, but he's most of all angry with himself because he wants to save Jeddah, and he is only one person. Whew. So they're stopped by a stormtrooper who questions why he is holding this Rhodian boy, and Churrit tells him that his parents are dead. And by the way, we get a flashback to his parents, and his parents owned a tourist shop that sold faith-based goodies. The boy's mother was a martial arts fan and took fighting classes with Churrit at the Kyber Temple. The boy's father was a fan of Old Republic operas.
Bith opera specifically, and remember,
Yes.
His father was Tak, liked Bith opera. His mother was Steya, and she studied with Churrit the martial art of Zama Shiwo. Let's keep that. Let's.
Yes.
You need to know this information. And I actually,
This is one of... Oh, go ahead.
I'm making fun of this. I'm being a little bit facetious. I'm happy to know this information. I like color. Characters getting splashes of color and backstory. I don't think it's a bad thing. Althin factors somewhat significantly into the rest of the book, so having some background with him and his connection to Churrit is okay with me.
Yeah, but I'm sure the people at Wikipedia love having another page with a character with a one-paragraph explanation, and that their only appearance was in this book. Anyway,
that's what they live for. Those Wikipedia freaks love it. They love it. Those freaks. They just want. Oh, Steya, Tak, Bith opera. Ooh, yeah. That's a Wikipedia editor.
We should maybe talk about, have you ever edited a Wikipedia page?
I actually haven't. I think my brother, when we have him on again, we'll have to talk about this. I believe he did in his Star Wars blog days, when he was a Star Wars blog boy.
Yes, stolen data tape.
Yes.
Check it out, Tumblr.
So,
but yeah, I know in high school, not that I actually indulged in any expanded universe, but something I enjoyed doing was they would have a page of images, and like they would say who the character was, but like wouldn't have like a page for the character, and most of these were just like role-playing book characters that had a photo with them. So like I would make pages for those characters and then go to StarWarsEncyclopedia.com, search the character name, which would then give me a paragraph, which then I would have to like paraphrase so I wasn't plagiarizing this character info for this character that showed up in a role-playing book. Very dorky stuff, but it used me in my sad and lonely high school days. Anyway, so they get stopped by a stormtrooper, and he's like, the boy's parents are dead. And the stormtrooper shows some empathy, and he lets them pass, but he warns them. He's like, hey, tonight there's a curfew, and anybody who's out past nightfall, we're shooting them. So Churrit and Althin reach the orphanage, and to Churrit's surprise, Baze is there. And Baze is not only there, but he has chav tea. Not that Terran tea. This is the good stuff. The good tea. So he pulls Churrit aside and he tells him his plan, the plan that he told Saw Gerrera. They're going to get a starship and they're going to ship the orphans off the planet. And Saw has agreed to help them secure a ship for them. Churrit likes the idea, but he knows there's many obstacles that they must get around in order to succeed. And that's the end of that chapter.
Yes, sorry. So, Baze, we enter this chapter. Baze is at a cantina at the Holy City spaceport, and he's hidden his cannon in a piece of somewhat conspicuous luggage. It's very large, but he thinks he can get away with it. Tenza, if you remember him, shows up with a Trandoshan who looks familiar. Baze is like, where do I recognize him? It's Wernad!
Wernad!
Return of Wernad! Anyway, so Baze takes his cannon out of his suitcase. He walks out of the cantina into the promenade, and he, does some Matrix lobby scene type shit. He opens fire. Just to distract people, I guess. So not Matrix lobby shit where they're actually killing people, but killing a bunch of innocent people. I saw the Matrix in theaters again last weekend. Masterpiece, one of my favorite movies of all time. But that lobby scene plays very differently these days. But it is very intense. Anyway, so regardless. Earlier on, this chapter flashes back and forth a little bit between the plan being enacted and the plan being made. So earlier, Baze and Chirrut, they're asking, they're with Dennick, and they're asking her, is this escape plan that we've devised that we don't know fully yet, is it even possible? She says it's next to impossible. She suggests some pilot, and Chirrut's like, I don't trust that guy. He's, whatever. We want you to be the pilot. You, Dennick. And she's like, huh. And then, so, back in the present tense, Baze proves to be a distraction. It allows Tenza and Wernad to run towards the Sentinel, a ship, whose purpose is unknown at this point. And so Baze turns around and he's waiting for Chirrut and the children. And you're like, well, how's this going to be? So earlier, back at the orphanage, Killy and Kaya are having a disagreement. Killy is saying, I'm not going to leave, you're going to go, Kaya. And Kaya's trying to convince her to come with her. And Killy asks Baze and Chirrut to leave the room. And Althan hasn't, and so he goes out with Althan, and they see Althan over in the corner, and he hasn't spoken to anyone since what happened. And Baze tells Chirrut, you're the one, you need to speak to him, and he's hesitant because he's not sure. He doesn't think he's reached him with his philosophical ramblings. But Chirrut then kind of just shifts the conversation. He's like, you know what, Kaya and Killy, they're never going to see each other again. Killy's too old and sick, would hold Kaya back, wherever they wind up. And Baze is like, that's pretty cold. And he's like, whatever, I'm Chirrut. So, Killy leaves the room, and she's like, I'm staying. Let's talk about this plan. And Kaya's in the back. She's going to go, but she's crying in the back of the room.
So, we jump to the next chapter, and it was the oddest sight for the people of Jeddah, the oddest sight they had seen since the Empire arrived. 30 children walking down the street, led by a droid and 4 adults, one claiming to be blind, who was the leader. The stormtroopers take notice and are unsure what to do. Technically, it's an illegal gathering, but come on, they're kids. With civilians watching, the civilians are like, I don't know what's going on, but this seems important. So they start following them, Forrest Gump style. And what was 30 kids and grown-ups soon grows to 200 people. It's a monumental group. 500 people. It grows. I might mention that later in the notes. Probably don't. But then we have a flashback to Beezer. Beezer Fortuna, Bib's cousin, in case you didn't know, Beezer, he has the idea to take an Imperial shuttle because every third day, this Sentinel shuttle arrives with command staff, and they come to do inspections of the mines, which last 4 to 6 hours, then they leave. The beauty of this ship is they don't come from the Star Destroyer parked above the city, they come from hyperspace. And it doesn't matter where the hell they come from, but when they take off, they just fly past the Star Destroyer all willy-nilly. So, and only a few guards protect this when the crew's out for 4 to 6 hours, so this ship is ripe for the taking. Now, they like this idea, but now we need to figure out how we're going to get 30 kids aboard. They toss around some ideas. They think about maybe we could steal a tank and throw the kids in the tank and then unload them at the ship. Then you still got to steal a tank. It's pretty risky. Then they're like, well, why don't we get some land speeders? But then, like, the streets are narrow. If they get stopped by the Imperials, you're going to have to run them down with the speeders, and then they're going to start firing, and then you got problems. Kids are in the line of fire. But Saw has an idea, and that he believes they should just walk there, because he believes the troopers would be hesitant to shoot kids just for going for a walk in broad daylight. People would get pissed if the stormtroopers start shooting kids in the middle of the streets. They'd have a riot on their hands. So Baze Chirrut and the Gim sisters don't like the idea, because what if they do shoot? But it's the least risky choice they have. Flash forward! Chirrut's leading the children back through the city, and they're going through the arch of the spaceport, which leads into that cantina area. And as they go through the archway, the crowd of people, it's so thick they can't get through the tiny arch. People are just walking over each other, which is great because now stormtroopers can't get through. So they see Baze, but Chirrut knows something is immediately wrong. Well, technically he didn't see him. He senses something is wrong. And Baze tells him Saw's men are taking the ship.
Motherfucker. Saw. Anyway, so chapter 13. We're on the last chapter of the book. And... Okay, sorry. Chapter 13. Last chapter, so I'm going to read the last excerpt from Collected Poems, Prayers, and Meditations on the Force, edited by Kozim Pell, disciple of the Whills, is "The Force is with me, and I am one with the Force, and I fear nothing, because all is as the Force wills it. This is the Guardian's mantra. Author, unknown." So, chapter 13, we flash back slightly, just slightly earlier, and it's to Baze's side of this story. Tenza and Wernad, they kill the pilot of the Sentinel, and Baze is like, this is unnecessary. What are you doing? You know, the kids are coming. They're going to see this corpse. Like, we don't need to... And so, Fortuna and Sperato show up. And Sperato and Fortuna's like gets onto the ship, and Sperato is holding his gun at Baze, and Baze is like, what's going on? And he convinces him to drop it. He appeals to the idea, like, you know, the children shouldn't see you pointing your blaster at me. And right at this moment, Chirrut arrives with everyone, and then the scene from the end of the last chapter occurs again. He says, you know, they're commandeering the ship, and the plan apparently on the part of Saw's guys is that they have a bunch of explosives loaded onto the ship, and they're planning to fly the shuttle loaded with bombs into the Star Destroyer and blow up the Star Destroyer. And it's like as this great rallying cry, like a symbol. And sure, it's like, you know, that's not going to, and Baze, they're both saying, this will not help. They're just going to send more people, like, whereas we could at least save some lives if we send these kids off. And so Chirrut appeals to both Sperato and Wernad. He appeals to them using his previous experience with them. With Wernad, you know, he calmed them down and talked about, you know, at the very beginning of the book, talking about, you know, how his anger was misplaced. And then also with Sperato, he reminds them that, is this the place that you wanted to find, the place you want to be? And Baze and Chirrut, they lead the children onto the ship anyway. Like, and Baze says to Fortuna, think about everyone who is watching us. Yeah, think about everyone who is watching us. Baze met Fortuna's eyes. His voice was level. His voice was calm. Yet each word seemed to have his entire weight, all his strength, standing behind it. And then think very carefully about what the general, or Saw Gerrera, would want you to do next. The general will never forgive this. He won't have to, Baze said. Our relationship with Saw Gerrera is over. Beezer hesitated. Then he moved out of the way. Crushed! He's done. Beezer's done. Beezer is done. So...
Get out of here, Beezer.
So hard. Saw's men, they relent, and Dennick is like, hey guys, we got like 3 minutes. We need to get everybody on. You guys say your goodbyes. And Killy says goodbye to Kaya, and Churrit, and gets Althan to complete this, the proverb that we quoted at the beginning of this chapter, because, he's been talking to Althan in these kind of, guardians of the Whills type sayings, and Althan has not been responsive because he's been in grief, and that's a difficult thing. But, so that's a nice little moment. And Baze and Churrit, they kind of playfully argue about who should go and who should stay. And obviously they're both going to stay. We know that because we've seen the movie. But Killy points this out, like, you guys need each other. You guys are going to stay here. And Saw is going to use this as a symbol anyway. He's not going to bother you. And the Empire won't know you had anything to do with it. So the ship gets away safely. They wave goodbye. And they head home. And that's the end of the book. So
wait.
Oh.
Churrit, he turns to Baze and says, "Tea?"
Oh, yes.
And Baze goes, "Terran?" Churrit says, "Yes." Baze grunted, "Fine." They began the long walk home through the city together.
Crushed. Terran tea is done for. So, this book...
That's the end of the book.
That is the end of the book, and this is what I'll say about the book, and I got the sense through this conversation that you are not a fan.
Mm-mm.
Very definitively.
Yeah, this book, disappointed in my opinion, because, I asked you earlier, what you wanted out of this book, and, I agree with what... It seems like we both agreed what we wanted, and, this book didn't deliver what we wanted at all. This book, we get character development of Baze and Churrit, but what do we learn about Baze and Churrit? They used to be Guardians of the Whills. They don't explain what Guardians of the Whills did. Why does this Temple of the Whills need Guardians? We don't know. But all we really learn is that Baze hates tea, and that they like kids.
I think that's a little
bit
simplistic.
Fluff.
I think we do learn about their relationship to... I agree we don't learn enough about the actual religion, but we learn about their relationship to that religion. You can kind of glean that a little bit from the movie, but it's not a huge focus of it. And those, I don't think this is a great book. I don't want to I'm not going hard for this book, but I will defend it in a couple areas. One being that this, I think on a world built, I wish we did know more about the actual kind of practice of this religion and stuff like that, as opposed to just kind of it being in the past. That's why it would have been nice to have some of the books set prior to the occupation. But the fact that I got a much better sense of life on Jeddah and what it's like from this book than I did from the film. I don't think this book is better than Rogue One the way I think Catalyst is better than Rogue One. I'm making that clear. But this book has added some nice context to that movie that I imagine if I watch the film again, I will probably enjoy it more. So its goal, and that's kind of the goal of a book like this, and that is kind of the problem that I talked about with a lot of new canon stuff earlier, is that it's all kind of supposed to be tied in to the film's storytelling, the film's plural storytelling, and I think that can be very limiting because, who knows? I don't know what. This might not have been as limited as other things because obviously it came out after Rogue One. But I do think something like we'll talk about before the Awakening, probably before Episode 9 comes out. But I think that book has some similar issues, and I feel bad beating up on my boy Greg Rucka a little bit, but it has some similar issues. And the reason I think for that is because that book came out before The Force Awakens, or it came out the week of, or something like that. So you know that even if there was more interesting ideas about those characters, they were never going to be revealed because most people hadn't seen the movie yet, if they even were able to. I don't remember the exact release date, so there's a lot. I agree with you that we didn't learn as much about them as I would like, but they have characters that are discernible now, which they really didn't in the film. And I think that is a problem with that movie. It's a problem with basically all the characters except for Jyn and Cassian in that film.
Well, and something about that film, too, is, like, prior to this book, I could tell you Baze's name, but I couldn't tell you Chirrut's name. Because, like, I never caught it. I've seen the movie multiple times, and I hear it, and I just forget it. But now, it's like, it wasn't until this book that I could tell you, like, look at him and be like, oh, he's not just the blind guy. That's Chirrut Imwe. Like...
Yeah, I mean,
so
he has one of the cooler moments in the movie, but it's, like, just cool because Donnie Yen is cool, you know? So...
Yeah.
And I think the movie... I like their dynamic. I think there's some fun little bits of banter back and forth. I wish they were together more throughout the book. And, yeah, I agree with you that I wish there was more just about what they did, like what a Guardian does.
Yeah, they're trained warriors. Why does this temple need trained warriors?
Right.
And, like,
I mean, I got the sense that they're supposed to be kind of leaders in this temple, but I don't really know for sure. And I agree about that. I thought some of the color about the setting in general, I listed those other religions that exist on Jeddah.
Yeah.
I thought that was fun. Like I like that kind of stuff.
I did too.
That's the kind of stuff I'd like more of in general in newer Star Wars storytelling and the canon stuff, and that includes the films. Maybe more than anything, I'd like more kind of flavor like that. So I appreciated that. The story itself, I thought, was a relatively standard kind of.
The orphans.
It could have been a Rebels episode, early Rebels episode. It's fine. The Saw stuff was nice. I wish he was in the book a little more. I don't think it's a great book, but I will defend. I just the fact of the matter is that the characters are far more fleshed out now. That doesn't mean that they're fully rounded, all-time great Star Wars characters, but I think they're solid, pretty good characters. I'm going to wrap this into kind of a final thoughts, and I'm going to say this book, I don't know, 5.5 midichlorians? Are we going with 0.5 now? Or 6? I'll round
Sure,
up to
we can
6.
do that.
I'll be nice. I don't know. 5.5. I don't know who that is. Maybe that's, is that Coyote Mundi? I don't know. I love Coyote.
Yeah. I've been thinking about maybe like Mace Windu is around there somewhere.
Yeah, he's in that range for sure.
But we haven't given a 6 yet, so like he could be 6.
Let's make Mace 6, and I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. I'm feeling a little generous. I had a good time with the book. I just think it's it's a minor effort. I'll never read it again. I'm glad I got it digitally. It's not taking up space in my life. But, it's not a terrible book. I don't regret reading it. I'm glad we could do this podcast about it. There's a lot more new canon stuff that I'm more excited to explore in future episodes.
I agree. And for mine, my final thought is most of what you said. This book is kind of fluff, in my opinion. And I am bummed that the character Two Tubes, do you know who I'm talking about from Rogue One? He's not in this book. Why is he not in this book? He's like Saw Gerrera's right-hand boy. So I was a little disappointed by that. That character also shows up in Solo with Memphis Nest, another amazing kind of rebel character. But I'm going to give this book a 5 midichlorian count. And for 5 midichlorians, so is Yoda 10?
Yeah, Yoda's 10. And
okay.
Although, again, I still challenge that to some degree. I think Luke being 10, he did bring balance to the Force.
That's true.
So I think Luke maybe should be 10 and Yoda 9. But,
okay.
What?
I'm going to say this book is halfway to Yoda, so I'm going to give it a yaddle.
A yaddle? Ooh.
A yaddle.
I don't know. Yeah. I feel like we might have actually put Yaddle at a lower level at some point.
Okay, we can do that. We can do that. But Yaddle can be like, well, who's one? Well, Bruck Chun is one.
Bruck Chun's
so
one.
Maybe
Zero
Yaddle is
2.
His 0.5 is Trioculus. No, as your brother pointed out, everybody is Force sensitive. There is no.
That's true. That's true.
He's point.
So I think.
All right. Kiadi. Let's go with Kiadi.
Or do you want to go Plo Koon?
See, here's the problem. I'm like that Dave Filoni. I love Plo Koon just because he looks cool.
But Kiadi is an icon.
Yeah.
He's like one of the he's one of the great nothing Jedis of all time. He's probably the best Jedi who has nothing to do.
Yeah. He actually speaks in the movies, unlike Plo Koon, too.
And we need some female Jedi in this scale somewhere.
Okay, well then, what's her name?
You want to do Ayla Secura? That could be 5.
That could. I was thinking either Ayla Secura, or oh crap, what's her name? Shakti.
Oh yeah. Ooh, we need to figure out where Ahsoka falls on this.
Oh, she's so high, though.
She would have to be high. We can't. We might have to start introducing 0.5 levels so that we can include all the great characters. Because, Ahsoka, I think, should be somewhere in the 7 to 8 range.
Yeah.
But I don't want to knock Obi-Wan or Qui-Gon off,
Well, maybe people can share ratings. So, you can just... Okay. It's like degrees. So, let's say 8 is Obi-Wan, all right? I'm going to give a book an 8, but I'm going to give it an Obi-Wan 8. Or I'm going to give it an Ahsoka 8, it's that little bit of...
That can be what's the flavor of the book,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
What's the taste of that 8,
So what we need to do is create a chart with every major Force-sensitive Star Wars character we can think of, and just make a list of... So Yoda and Luke can be on the same level.
I agree, yeah.
And
because they're completely 2 different flavors.
Faces, Yoda, Luke.
Yeah.
We should do
one's
this.
pistachio, one's vanilla. Yeah,
but
exactly.
Sometime in the next few weeks, the next few episodes, we will have a chart. It will be on our Instagram and our Twitter. It's going to happen. We've been promising this
finally
the whole
it's going to happen.
But
I will actually start this soon.
Yes. So
all right.
Anyway,
well, let's move on.
Because we're done with Guardians of the Whills.
Well, actually, not really, Tim, because I want to ask you, do you know what are the Whills?
Okay, so you want to talk about the George premise for the sequel trilogy is what you're going to talk about.
Well, we can get into that, but I also want to talk about what the canon what the canon definition of the Whills are. Then we'll get into the George thing. This is time for our favorite segment. I like that Wookieepedia, and then put the drop in.
I like that Wookieepedia.
So the canon definition of the Whills, according to Wikipedia, is the Whills were a community of beings who notably wrote the Journal of the Whills, a document that recorded important events in the galaxy, as well as philosophical reflections in verse. There were also shamans of the Whills, who taught Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn the ability to retain one consciousness after death required absolute selfishness.
This is actually
Selflessness.
explained in Clone Wars. You'll get to this in Season 6.
Yes. So, and this definition comes from, of course, they cited the data bank entry article of StarWars.com for Qui-Gon Jinn, and then that book, A Certain Point of View, is mentioned in the citation. And do you know why?
Why is that?
Because at the end of the book, the final short story within it is the story of two Whills arguing, and the one Whill has written to start the story a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and the other Whill thinks this is a stupid premise, and the two are arguing over this.
I don't like this.
I don't either.
We're very positive on this show, and I know that we gave a kind of middling review to the book, but that's canon?
That's canon. That there's two Whills at some point in time. One wrote the story of Star Wars and started it with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and another Whill was just like, I don't know about that.
Yikes.
So,
I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know about that either, man.
See, I don't know what the name of that story is, but Greg Rucka actually wrote Grounded in that. Can you look this up? Because, I don't know who wrote that story.
I doubt
but,
that. I know that you were kind of lukewarm on this. I cannot imagine he wrote that.
Yeah, well, look it up because I don't have internet connection right now. So who wrote
here.
He wrote Grounded. Who is that the story of?
I'm looking it up. I got it here. Grounded. That is the story of Nira Case.
Who?
Let's see who that is. A female individual who served as the chief in charge of starfighter maintenance at the Great Temple on Yavin 4 in 0 BBY. So it's an original character.
Wow. Well, that's nice.
That's a fun idea. That's cool.
Yeah. All right. So
let's see who wrote that.
Yeah. I don't know the name of that story. I don't have that in my notes.
Whills.
But if you go onto the Whills Wikipedia page, you can find it.
Todd Engelberger wrote it. He also wrote a recent young reader's adaptation of Return of the Jedi. And The Mighty Chewbacca and the Forests of Fear, a book we will be covering on this podcast at some point.
Yes, it has a ridiculous cover. I laugh every time I see it because of how corny looking it is.
I couldn't get a physical copy of the book we were reading this week in stores, so I had to get it on my Kindle. And but the stores had all kinds of copies of Chewbacca and the Forest of Fear, so we'll definitely be covering that at some point, maybe on Peter Mayhew's birthday or something.
Oh, that's a good idea. We need to look that up. All right, so let's jump into the behind the scenes a little bit on the Whills page, and this you can find on the. I can't remember if this was on the Legends tab or the Canon tab, but this is the behind-the-scenes section. In early drafts of A New Hope, the Whills was the equivalent of the Force. Originally, I was trying to have the story be told by somebody else, an immortal being known as a Whill. There was somebody watching this whole story and recording it, somebody probably wiser than the mortal players in the actual events. I eventually dropped this idea, and the concepts behind the Whills turned into the Force, but the Whills became part of this massive amount of notes, quotes, and background information I used for the scripts. The stories were actually taken from the Journal of the Whills, and that's George Lucas there.
So let's be fair to the guy that wrote that story. That's sort of in keeping with at least the behind-the-scenes aspect of the Whills.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And there was that thing that came out about what Lucas's ideas for the sequel trilogy would be, and they would involve the Whills in some fashion.
I have this quote here, yes. Yeah. This was part of the James Cameron had the Story of Science Fiction, the TV show on AMC, where he interviewed all these big players. This was not part of the TV interview, but it was part of the companion book that came out with it. So this is George here. my sequel trilogy was going to go into the microbiotic world. There's a world of creatures that operate differently than we do. I call them the Whills. And the Whills are the ones who actually control the universe. They feed off the Force. So this is kind of because in the episode 1 where Anakin asks Qui-Gon what are the midichlorians, and as Qui-Gon says, midichlorians are a microscopic life form that reside within all living cells and communicate with us, the Force, and they determine the will of the Force. So George set this up in episode 1, and he was going to double down on it in the sequel trilogy.
People would have really hated that.
And he says that in the book too. He's like, I don't think people would have liked it, which is sad, in my opinion. But because George said this in my head, it's canon.
Yeah, it is. I don't know how committed he actually was to it. I'd be curious to actually eventually read the script that Michael Arndt wrote in collaboration with George, and how much of that is emphasized and how much of it is just maybe brought up in passing. And I don't know. I've never been super anti midichlorians. I do wonder what the storytelling capability of something like the Whills would be that wouldn't undercut kind of the narrative of the characters. Yeah. I don't doubt my boy at all. And I also wonder how much of this was kind of like this was maybe what he thought very broadly back in the day. I'm talking about like kind of post Jedi pre-prequels, like thought about as a sequel idea. I don't know how much of this was something he was thinking. I mean, he definitely was thinking about the Whills a little bit around the time he sold Star Wars, because the stuff you were talking about with Qui-Gon, that's all revealed in Clone Wars. Near the end of Clone Wars, which he had very direct involvement in. I'd be. I'm curious about it, and obviously it's very sad. People would have hated it. And I do think people probably would have hated it. He's not wrong about that.
Yeah, I agree. They hated midichlorians. So,
and I don't mind the midichlorians but honestly, part of the reason I don't mind the midichlorians, and we don't need to get too into this, is that it also comes in a movie that introduces Qui-Gon's idea of the living force, that between all people, and I think it just kind of presents two kind of sides of how you look at the Force. It could be this biological thing, but it's still a mystery. We don't really know what's happening. So
I agree.
But anyway, the Whills, very interesting Wikipedia corner, Levi.
Mm-hmm.
So. We still don't have any letters from you guys, please.
But I did develop a game for us to play.
Oh.
For you to play, actually.
Okay.
This is a very loose game. You're gonna probably nail this game. I originally had an idea for a game called He Said, Sheev Said. So it somehow involved Sheev Palpatine, but I couldn't figure out what the game was. So I came up with, this is a really bad pun on Rick and Morty, a show that I don't watch, but this is Rick and Georgie. And in this game, I'm going to read you 3 quotes, and you need to tell me if this quote is from prequel producer Rick McCallum, who we haven't mentioned on this podcast yet, but we think is a very silly character.
Oh, he's one of our favorite characters.
Or is the quote George?
We need to do a whole bonus episode about Rick at some point.
I think so. Yeah. I think so, yeah. All right, round 1.
Okay.
Every single frame, every single shot in the movie has a digital effect.
Rick McCallum.
Correct.
Yes. Is that from?
Right.
Is that from Within a Minute, the documentary on the Sith DVD?
I think so. Yeah.
Kill me.
Yeah. All right. This one. It's easy to be a backseat driver. It's even easier to be a backseat driver when you're not in the same car.
That sounds like George complaining about people not liking the prequels.
You're wrong. That's actually Rick
Damn.
complaining about the... Yes. All right. Final one. If a boy and girl walk off into the sunset hand in hand in the last scene, it adds $10 million to the box office.
That's gotta be George.
That's George.
He's
You're
so
right.
cynical about Hollywood.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, that's congratulations, 2 out of 3.
Not bad.
Not bad. I probably won't do this game again because when I was researching this game, George is well more well-versed and pronounced than articulate than Rick McCallum. I did find this one quote where Rick McCallum tries to defend Jar Jar in a very stupid way. People who love movies, the kind of people who understand the process, realize if you do a character like Gollum or Jar Jar or any major digital character, that it costs twice as much as having Tom Cruise in a movie.
I don't know if that's a defense so much as just explaining how much it costs.
I guess so, but I think he's like trying to like beef. I mean, but he does compare Gollum and Jar Jar.
Yeah,
they're two very different ends of the spectrum. And he said Gollum first, not Jar Jar first. Yeah, that's a very Rick quote. That's why I didn't say that one, because you would have gotten that one right off the bat. So anyway, that was Rick and Georgie. We'll probably never play this game again. But if anybody has an idea of how we should play He Said, She Said, let us know.
Yeah, and if you have anything you want us to talk about, a question about Star Wars, anything, please email us at padawanlibrary@gmail.com or send us a message on Instagram or
Twitter.
Facebook or Twitter at Padawan Library, where we've got a great Instagram. And that's all thanks to you, Levi. The Instagram is phenomenal.
Thank you. Yeah, I run the Instagram.
He's our social media maven.
Yeah, I don't understand Twitter, so the Twitter is just a mirror.
That's
the
fine.
Twitter and Facebook are just mirrors.
What are we doing here? We're old world people.
All right, let's get to our major announcement. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Well, first I want to say next week we will be back with Jedi Apprentice again. We're going to do The Captive Temple, number 7 of that series by Jude Watson. But in 3 weeks, we will be having a big 20th anniversary celebration of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace.
The Phantom Menace!
So, that movie came out on May 19th, 1999. And
I remember the day.
So on May, I believe we're doing this on May 17th, the Friday before, we will be releasing a very special celebration that will include lots of surprises, but the main thing that if you want to read along with us and prepare, we will be discussing 3 of the Star Wars Episode 1 journals, including Anakin Skywalker, Padme Amidala, and, of course, Darth Maul.
It's going to be a great time. These books are a lot of fun. They're actually printed on magazine paper. Every page is full color. At the beginning of every chapter is an image of the character in the scene and what their costume would be at that moment. So you don't have to mentally picture it. Also,
that's really hard for you, Levi. You're a beginning reader.
It really is.
That picture.
It really is. It's actually really silly when I was flipping through the Anakin book because Anakin's outfit almost doesn't change throughout the entire book, so it's just the same image every chapter. The Queen Amidala book is written by, of course, one of our gods on this show, Jude Watson. I'm very excited to see her take on Queen Amidala. This is a character we haven't really had the opportunity to discuss yet. We actually haven't had the opportunity to discuss any of these characters, and of course we will be talking at length about Anakin in the Jedi Quest series. So we are very excited for the 20th anniversary, because for us, the fact that it's been 20 years, I think in my book, this is where I'm old now. I'm no longer a child or a young adult. I'm just old because episode 1 is 20 years old, and any kid watching The Force Awakens or Last Jedi just don't, that happened 20 years ago. They have no idea what this moment, this monumental moment was like.
So we will talk all about it on that episode.
Yes, I'm getting into it too much.
Yeah, we save it for the podcast. We will be talking about it. There's going to be a lot of, I want to break the movie down a little bit. I'm probably going to rewatch the film. And
Same.
We're going to talk about the movie. These books obviously retell the story of the movie, so we're not going to do our typical breakdown of the book that we do. We're going to talk about the film and how these books tie in, these characters, the importance of these characters, how they were treated at the time, how we feel about them now, all that stuff. It's going to be a really fun celebration of 20 years of this movie. This was a very formative experience for us. It's neither of our favorite Star Wars movie or anything, but it means a lot to us. So, and we hope it means a lot to you guys, and we hope that you guys will enjoy that. It's going to be a very fun episode. So, join us again in 3 weeks for that, but join us next week for The Captive Temple, Jedi Apprentice number 7, Jude Watson returns. See you guys next week.
The library is closed.
Padawan Library is hosted and produced by Tim May and Levi Peretic. It is edited by Tim May. Our theme song is by The Astral Project. Our artwork is by Freddie Funbuns. Padawan Library is copyright 2019 by Tim May and Levi Peretic. All rights reserved.